Welcome to Night Whisper. Night Whisper brings you the darkest tales from the shadows. Join our community. Subscribe, leave a like, and prepare yourself for stories that will haunt your dreams. My name is Daniel Mercer, and I've been working as a park ranger in the Shoshone National Forest in Wyoming for 8 years. Spanning approximately 2.5 million acres of untouched wilderness, Shoshone is one of America's oldest national forests. It is a breathtakingly beautiful place, with jagged mountain peaks, alpine meadows, clear lakes, and dense lodgepole pine and spruce forests. Alongside this beauty and natural life, it is a place filled with countless dangers and cruelty. Every year, bodies are recovered from the forest. Lost hikers, fallen climbers, tourists who underestimate grizzly territory. I grew up in Cody, just east of the forest, so these mountains have been part of my life since childhood. My father was a hunting guide, and he taught me to read tracks, navigate by stars, and respect the wilderness. When I joined the ranger service, it felt like coming home. I knew every trail, every ridge, every hidden valley in my sector. Or at least, I thought I did. What I'm about to tell you happened 3 months ago, and it's something I still can't fully explain. The official report filed with the National Park Service lists it as a wildlife incident with inconclusive evidence. But that's bureaucratic language for, we don't want to deal with this. Because what I encountered out there in the Absaroka Range wasn't a bear, wasn't a mountain lion, and sure as hell wasn't anything I'd ever seen in 8 years of patrolling these woods. And the worst part? I don't think it's gone. It started in early September, just as the tourist season was winding down. The aspens were turning gold, and there was that crisp edge to the air that told you winter wasn't far behind. I was working the night shift, which meant patrolling the remote northern sector, an area so isolated that we rarely saw visitors, except during peak summer months. My patrol partner that season was Mark Holloway, a solid guy in his mid-30s who'd transferred from Yellowstone 2 years back. Mark was ex-military, methodical, and not prone to panic. We developed a good rhythm, splitting 12-hour shifts, covering different zones, and checking in by radio every 2 hours. That particular night, I was driving Forest Road 293, a barely maintained dirt track that wound through some of the densest timber in my sector. The road was so rough that most visitors wouldn't even attempt it. My truck jolted over rocks and exposed roots as the headlights cut tunnels through the darkness. The radio was playing some old Johnny Cash song, barely audible over the engine noise. Around 11:30 p.m., I killed the engine near a trailhead to do a quick check of the area. Sometimes we'd find illegal campsites or evidence of poaching. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped out into the cool night air. The silence hit me immediately, that absolute quiet you only get in deep wilderness where the nearest human being might be 20 miles away. I was about to radio Mark when I heard it. A scream. Not a human scream, at least not entirely. It started low, almost like a growl, then rose into this wavering shriek that seemed to bounce off the canyon walls. The sound made every hair on my body stand up. I've heard elk bugle during rut, I've heard mountain lions scream, I've even heard a wounded bear bellow in rage. This was none of those things. The cry lasted maybe 5 seconds before cutting off abruptly, leaving only echoes rolling through the forest. Then, nothing. The silence that followed felt heavy, oppressive, like the woods themselves were holding their breath. I stood there, flashlight beam trembling slightly in my hand, listening hard. My training kicked in. Stay calm, assess the situation, don't make assumptions. But my gut was screaming that something was wrong. I keyed the radio. "Mark, you copy?" Static, then his voice. "Yeah, I'm here, what's up?" "Did you hear that? That scream?" A pause. "Negative, where are you?" "Trailhead 7, near Dead Horse Creek. You didn't hear anything?" "Nothing. Could have been an elk. They're starting to rut." I wanted to believe him, but I'd heard enough elk to know this wasn't that. Still, arguing over the radio wasn't going to help. Yeah, maybe. I'm going to take a quick look around. Want me to swing by? No, stay on your route. I'll let you know if I find anything. I started walking the perimeter of the trailhead, sweeping my light across the tree line. The beam picked up nothing unusual, just pines, granite boulders, and undergrowth. But as I moved toward the trail itself, something caught my eye. Tracks. They were in a patch of soft mud near the creek, clear as day. My first thought was bear. They were big, definitely bigger than a human footprint. But as I knelt down to examine them, that theory fell apart. The print was roughly 18 inches long and shaped vaguely like a human foot, but wider, with a pronounced heel and what looked like 5 distinct toe impressions. The stride length between prints was massive, at least 6 feet. Whatever made these tracks was bipedal and huge. I pulled out my phone and took several photos, making sure to include my ranger badge for scale. My hands were steady, but my mind was racing. In 8 years, I'd seen thousands of animal tracks. These didn't match anything in my experience. A twig snapped somewhere in the darkness to my left. I spun, flashlight cutting through the trees. Who's there? Nothing, just shadows and pine trunks. This is Park Ranger Mercer. Identify yourself. Still nothing. But I had the distinct feeling of being watched. You know that prickling sensation on the back of your neck, that primitive instinct that tells you you're prey? I had it bad. I backed toward my truck, keeping the light sweeping across the tree line. Whatever was out there, I wasn't equipped to deal with it alone at midnight. The smart play was to document what I'd found, call it in, and come back with backup during daylight. I climbed into the truck, locked the doors, something I'd never felt the need to do before, and fired up the engine. As I pulled away, I glanced in the rearview mirror. For just a second, I could have sworn I saw 2 pale reflections in the darkness, like eyes catching my taillights. But when I hit the brakes and looked again, there was nothing there. The next morning, I brought the photos to our district office in Wapiti. My supervisor, Elena Price, was a no-nonsense woman in her 50s who'd spent 30 years with the Forest Service. She'd seen it all: illegal logging, drug operations, lost hikers, fatal bear attacks. Nothing rattled her. I knocked on her door, and she waved me in without looking up from her paperwork. Mercer, you're supposed to be off duty. I know, but I found something last night I think you need to see. She sighed and pushed her reading glasses up. If this is about another illegal campsite, it's not. I pulled out my phone and showed her the track photos. Elena studied them for a long moment, zooming in and out. Her expression didn't change, but I saw her jaw tighten slightly. Where'd you take these? Dead Horse Creek Trailhead, around 11:30 last night. And you heard something that led you there? I hesitated. This was the part that would make me sound crazy. A scream. Not like any animal I've heard before. She handed my phone back. Probably a bear. They can make some strange sounds, especially if they're injured or aggressive. Elena, look at that print. That's not a bear. It's not a clear print either, Daniel. Could be a bear track that got distorted by mud or water. Could be 2 different tracks overlapping. Hell, could be someone messing with you. Who would be out there at midnight making fake tracks? She leaned back in her chair, studying me. I don't know, but I do know that every few years someone comes in here with Bigfoot photos or stories about hearing strange things in the woods, and every single time it turns out to be nothing. Pareidolia, misidentification, pranks, take your pick. I'm not some tourist with an overactive imagination. I know what I saw. I'm not saying you're lying. I'm saying you probably saw something ordinary and jumped to extraordinary conclusions. It happens. The mind fills in gaps, especially at night when you're alone. I felt frustration building. So you're not going to investigate? Investigate what? Some muddy tracks and a weird sound? Daniel, we're understaffed as it is. Unless you've got a body or clear evidence of danger to visitors, I can't justify pulling people off their regular duties for this. What if that thing comes back? What if it approaches a campsite? Elena's expression softened slightly. Look, if you hear or see anything else concrete, document it and call it in immediately. But right now, all you've got is speculation. I can't work with that. I left her office feeling dismissed and angry. But more than that, I felt unsettled. Because Elena was right about one thing. I didn't have solid proof, just tracks, a sound, and a feeling. But that feeling wouldn't go away. I was off duty for the next 2 days, but I couldn't stop thinking about what I'd found. I spent hours online, looking at wildlife track databases, reading about bear behavior, even diving into cryptozoology forums, though I felt ridiculous doing it. The thing was, those tracks didn't match anything. Bear tracks showed claw marks and a different toe arrangement. Human tracks wouldn't be that large or show that stride length, and the depth of the impressions suggested something incredibly heavy, at least 600 pounds, maybe more. When I returned to work, I volunteered for another night shift in the same sector. Mark raised an eyebrow when I told him, "You really want to go back out there after that weird call you had?" "That's exactly why I want to go back. I need to know what made those sounds." He shrugged. "Your funeral. Just don't shoot any tourists who are out there camping illegally." "If I find tourists out there, I'll be relieved." I headed out around sunset, taking the same route as before. This time I came prepared. Extra batteries for my flashlight, a handheld spotlight, my service weapon cleaned and loaded, and a digital recorder. If I heard that sound again, I was going to capture it. The evening was quiet. I checked several campsites, cleared some fallen branches off a hiking trail, and helped a pair of day hikers who'd stayed out too late find their way back to the parking area. By 10 p.m., I was back near Dead Horse Creek. I parked at the same trailhead and got out, listening carefully. The night was clear, with a half moon providing decent visibility. I could hear the creek burbling nearby and the occasional hoot of an owl. Normal night sounds. I walked the trail with my spotlight, sweeping the beam across the underbrush. The tracks from 3 nights ago were gone, washed away by a brief rainstorm. I continued up the trail about half a mile, then stopped at a small clearing. That's when I smelled it. A thick, pungent odor, like wet dog mixed with rotting meat, and something else I couldn't identify. It was so strong it made my eyes water. I'd smelled plenty of dead animals in my time, but this was different. This smell was alive. I turned slowly, spotlight cutting through the trees. "Is someone there?" The smell intensified. I heard a low rumble, not quite a growl, not quite a vocalization. It seemed to come from everywhere at once, vibrating in my chest. Then I saw it. About 40 yards away, partially obscured by pine trees, was a shape. At first, I thought it was a person standing behind the trees, but as my spotlight found it, I realized how wrong that assumption was. It was massive, at least 8 feet tall, maybe taller. The body was covered in dark, matted hair. The arms hung past the knees. And the face, God, the face. It was somewhere between human and ape, with a pronounced brow ridge, deep-set eyes that reflected my light like a cat's, and a wide mouth that seemed too large for the skull. We stared at each other for what felt like an eternity, but was probably only 3 or 4 seconds. Then it moved. Not toward me, away, crashing through the underbrush with shocking speed. I heard branches snapping, rocks tumbling, and that horrible smell fading as it put distance between us. Within seconds, it was gone, leaving only broken vegetation in its wake. I stood there, spotlight shaking in my hand, trying to process what I'd just seen. Every rational part of my brain was screaming that it couldn't be real. But my eyes had seen it. My nose had smelled it. My ears had heard it moving through the forest. I keyed my radio with trembling fingers. "Mark, I need you at Dead Horse Creek trailhead, now." What's wrong? You okay? Just get here, please. While I waited for Mark, I examined the area where the creature had been standing. More tracks, these ones even clearer than before. I also found several broken branches at heights that suggested something very tall had pushed through here. And clinging to one low branch was a tuft of coarse, dark hair. I carefully bagged the hair sample, trying to keep my hand steady. This was evidence, real, physical evidence. Elena couldn't dismiss this. Could she? Mark arrived about 20 minutes later, his truck bouncing up the rough road. He jumped out, hand on his weapon. What happened? I saw it. The thing that made those tracks. It was here maybe 15 minutes ago. He looked at me like I'd lost my mind. You saw what? I don't know what to call it, but it was big, covered in hair, walking on two legs. I've got tracks, hair samples, and I recorded the sounds it made. I held up my digital recorder, praying it had captured something. Mark's expression shifted from concern to skepticism. Daniel, come on. You're telling me you saw Bigfoot? I'm telling you I saw something that doesn't match any known animal in this region. Look at these tracks. Look at this hair. This isn't a hoax. He examined the evidence with his own flashlight, his face troubled. I'm not saying you're lying, but man, this is a lot to believe. I know how it sounds, but I know what I saw. We spent another hour documenting everything, more photos, measurements, video footage of the area. Mark even climbed up to where I'd seen the creature standing, confirming that the broken branches were at least 9 feet off the ground. Finally, as we were packing up, Mark turned to me. Even if I believe you, and I'm not saying I do, what do you want to do about it? We report this, and Elena's going to think we've both gone crazy. He was right. Elena had already dismissed my first report. Coming back with stories of a Sasquatch sighting would probably get me sent for psychological evaluation. But I had evidence now, physical evidence. And if there was something dangerous living in these woods, people needed to know. We document everything thoroughly, I said. Photos, measurements, samples. Then we go to Elena with a complete report. She can't ignore this. Mark nodded slowly. All right, but Daniel, if this thing is real, if there's actually something out there that big and that aggressive, we need to be really careful. Because whatever it is, we just spooked it. And when you spook a predator, sometimes it comes back. His words hung in the air as we drove back toward the station. I kept checking my mirrors, half expecting to see those reflecting eyes in the darkness. But the road behind us stayed empty. For now. The next morning, Mark and I walked into Elena's office with a folder full of evidence. Photos, measurements, hair samples sealed in plastic bags, audio recordings, and a detailed written report of both encounters. I'd barely slept, spending most of the night organizing everything into a professional presentation. Elena looked up from her computer, saw both of us standing there, and immediately frowned. This better be good, if you're both here off duty. I placed the folder on her desk. We found something in the northern sector, something that doesn't match any known wildlife in this region. She opened the folder and began flipping through the photos. Her expression remained neutral, but I saw her pause on the clearest track photo. Where did these come from? Dead Horse Creek area. I had another encounter last night, actually saw the creature this time. Mark arrived shortly after and helped document the scene. Elena's eyes snapped to Mark. You saw it too? No, ma'am. I arrived after Daniel's sighting, but I did examine the evidence and, well, I can't explain it. Those tracks don't match bear, elk, moose, or any other animal I'm familiar with. She turned back to the photos, studying them for a long moment. Then she picked up one of the hair samples. You collected this from the scene? Yes. It was snagged on a branch about 9 feet off the ground. Whatever left it was tall. Elena set the sample down and leaned back in her chair, fingers steepled. All right, I'm going to be straight with you both. Do you know how many Bigfoot reports we get in national forests every year? Hundreds. And do you know how many have ever been verified? 0, not 1. Elena, she held up a hand. Let me finish. I'm not saying you're making this up. I'm saying there are explanations for everything in this folder. Those tracks could be bear tracks distorted by weather. The hair could be from a moose or elk. The sounds you heard could be any number of animals or even wind through the canyons. I saw it, I said firmly. 8 feet tall, covered in dark hair, walking on 2 legs. That's not a misidentification. At night, under stress, the human mind can create very convincing illusions. Add in the power of suggestion. You were already primed to see something unusual after finding those tracks. And it's entirely possible you saw a bear or even a person and your brain filled in the details. I felt anger rising. So you're calling me unreliable? I'm saying you're human. We all are, and humans make mistakes, especially in high-stress situations. She closed the folder. I'll send the hair samples to the state lab for analysis. If they come back as something unusual, we'll revisit this conversation. But until then, I need you both focused on your actual jobs. We've got hunting season starting in 2 weeks, and that means increased visitor traffic and all the problems that come with it. Mark and I exchanged glances. He looked as frustrated as I felt. What about visitor safety? I pressed. If there is something dangerous out there, if there was something dangerous, we'd have incident reports, injured hikers, destroyed campsites, livestock kills, but we don't. In fact, that sector has been quiet all season. Elena stood, signaling the meeting was over. I appreciate you bringing this to my attention, but I'm not shutting down trails or issuing warnings based on ambiguous evidence. That would create panic and hurt tourism for no good reason. We left her office in silence. Once outside, Mark shook his head. I knew that would happen. She didn't even take us seriously. Can you blame her? From a bureaucratic standpoint, she's making the right call. No concrete proof, no action. He clapped me on the shoulder. Look, I believe you saw something, but maybe Elena's right. Maybe it was just a bear and the light played tricks. I wanted to argue, but what was the point? Even Mark, who'd seen the evidence firsthand, was backing away from the implications. And I understood why. Accepting that something unknown and potentially dangerous lived in these woods meant accepting that everything we thought we knew about this forest was incomplete. It was easier to rationalize it away. But I couldn't, because I'd looked into those eyes, and they'd looked back at me with an intelligence that no bear possessed. Over the next week, I threw myself into research. During my off hours, I scoured every resource I could find: Native American legends, historical reports, cryptozoology databases, even academic papers on primate behavior. The Shoshone and Arapaho tribes, who originally inhabited this region, had stories about what they called Numu Tsapi, the stone giant or forest walker. These beings were described as tall, hairy, and elusive, living in the deepest parts of the mountains. They weren't considered evil, but they weren't friendly either. The tribes believed they were guardians of sacred places, and encountering one was an omen, though whether good or bad depended on the circumstances. I found scattered historical accounts too. In 1897, a prospector named Thomas McCready reported being chased from his camp by a wild man covered in hair in the Absaroka Range. In 1924, a hunting party claimed they'd shot at a giant ape-like creature near the Wind River. In 1968, a forest ranger, someone like me, filed a report about finding massive footprints near Togwotee Pass. Each report had been dismissed or explained away, just like mine. I also discovered something disturbing: several missing persons cases in the Shoshone area over the past decade. Most were ruled accidental deaths or drownings, with bodies eventually recovered. But 3 hikers had vanished without a trace. No bodies, no gear, nothing. The searches had been extensive, involving dogs, helicopters, and dozens of volunteers. It was as if they'd simply ceased to exist. Could there be a connection? It seemed like a reach, but the coincidence nagged at me. My obsession didn't go unnoticed. Mark started avoiding me, claiming he was busy with other assignments. The other rangers began making jokes about Mercer's monster. Even Lydia Crane, the newest member of our team, a bright, eager 26-year-old fresh from the academy, looked at me with concern. She cornered me one afternoon in the equipment room. "Daniel, can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Is everything okay? You've seemed really distracted lately." I considered brushing her off, but something about her genuine concern made me pause. You ever feel like you've seen something that changes everything, but nobody believes you? Lydia hesitated. "You mean the thing you reported? The tracks?" "So you heard about that?" "Everyone's heard about it. Some of the guys are making fun, but—" She glanced around, making sure we were alone. "My grandmother was Shoshone. She told me stories about the forest walkers when I was a kid. I always thought they were just legends, but what if they're not?" I felt a surge of hope. "You believe me?" "I don't know what I believe, but I know you're not the type to make things up or panic over nothing. If you say you saw something unusual, I'm willing to consider that you did." It was the first time anyone had said anything remotely supportive since my encounter. "Thank you. That actually means a lot." "Have you thought about going back out there? Trying to find it again?" "Elena made it pretty clear she doesn't want me pursuing this." Lydia shrugged. "What Elena doesn't know won't hurt her. If you're going back out there, I'll go with you. 2 sets of eyes are better than 1, and if something happens, you'll have a witness." I should have said no. I should have told her it was too dangerous, too risky to her career. But I was desperate for support, for someone who didn't think I was crazy. "All right," I said, "but we do this off-duty and we don't tell anyone. If we find something concrete, then we bring it to Elena. Deal?" "Deal." 3 nights later, Lydia and I drove out to Dead Horse Creek under the cover of darkness. We told no one where we were going, and we'd made sure to use her personal vehicle rather than a ranger truck. If this went south, I didn't want her career destroyed along with mine. We parked at the trailhead just after 10 p.m. The night was cold and clear, with a 3/4 moon providing good visibility. Lydia had brought a high-end trail camera, the kind hunters use, with night vision capability. "If this thing is real," she said, setting up the camera near the area where I'd found the tracks, "we'll get footage." "It's real, trust me." We hiked about 2 miles up the trail, stopping periodically to set up additional cameras. Lydia had brought 4 in total, which she strategically placed to cover different angles and elevations. By midnight, we had a network of surveillance covering roughly a square mile. Then, we waited. We found a good vantage point on a rocky outcrop overlooking a small meadow. From here, we could see the trail and much of the surrounding forest. Lydia had brought thermoses of coffee and energy bars. We settled in, speaking in whispers. "How long have you been a ranger?" she asked. 8 years? You?" 6 months. She smiled ruefully. "I know I'm the rookie, but I've wanted this job since I was a kid. My grandmother used to bring me out here, teach me about the plants and animals. She said the forest has its own language, if you know how to listen." "What would she say about what we're doing right now?" Lydia was quiet for a moment. "She'd probably say we're being foolish. The forest walkers don't like to be hunted. They reveal themselves on their own terms, not ours." "Great. So we're out here risking our necks for nothing?" "I didn't say that. I said they don't like to be hunted, but you've already seen one. Maybe it'll show itself again." An hour passed, then 2. The forest remained quiet, almost too quiet. I realized I hadn't heard any of the usual night sounds. No owls, no coyotes, no rustling of small animals in the underbrush. "Do you notice how quiet it is?" I whispered. Lydia nodded slowly. "Yeah, that's not normal." Then, from somewhere in the valley below, came a sound that made my blood run cold. It was the same scream I'd heard that first night, starting low and rising to a wavering shriek that echoed off the canyon walls. Lydia gripped my arm. "What the hell was that?" "That's what I heard. That's what led me to the tracks." The scream came again, closer this time, and then, impossibly, it was answered by another cry from a different direction. Then a third, somewhere to our left. "There's more than one," Lydia breathed. We sat frozen as the calls echoed back and forth across the valley. It sounded like communication, like they were coordinating. The realization hit me hard. These weren't just animals. They were intelligent. They were organized. And we were right in the middle of their territory. "We need to go," I said quietly. "Now." We packed up quickly and started down the trail, moving as quietly as possible. Behind us, the calls continued. At one point, I could have sworn I heard footsteps, heavy, deliberate footsteps, paralleling our path through the trees. We were being followed. "Don't run," I whispered to Lydia. "Running triggers predator instinct. Just keep moving steadily." She nodded, her face pale in the moonlight. I could see her hand resting on the canister of bear spray on her belt. We were about a mile from the trailhead when I heard it, a branch snapping off to our right. I turned, flashlight ready, and saw a shape moving through the trees. It was massive, far too large to be a bear. It moved on two legs with a strange, loping gait. "Daniel," Lydia whispered urgently, "there's another one on the left." I looked where she was pointing and saw a second shape, this one even larger, keeping pace with us through the forest. We were being herded. "When I say run," I told her, "you run straight for the truck. Don't look back. Don't stop. Understand?" "What about you?" "I'll be right behind you. On 3. 1, 2, 3. We bolted down the trail. Behind us, I heard a tremendous crashing as the creatures gave chase. They moved through the forest with shocking speed, their footfalls sounding like thunder. I could hear their breathing, deep, rumbling sounds that seemed to shake the air. Lydia was faster than me, pulling ahead on the trail. I pushed myself harder, my lungs burning. The parking area came into view, her truck sitting alone under the moonlight. "Keys!" I shouted. "Get the keys ready!" She fumbled with them as we ran, hitting the unlock button. We reached the truck and threw ourselves inside, slamming the doors just as something huge emerged from the tree line. It was the same creature I'd seen before. 8 feet tall, covered in dark matted hair, with those horrible intelligent eyes. It stood at the edge of the clearing, watching us. A moment later, 2 more appeared beside it. They didn't approach the truck, didn't try to attack. They just stood there, watching. Lydia turned the key with shaking hands. The engine roared to life. As we pulled away, I looked back through the rear window. All 3 creatures were still standing there, silhouetted against the trees. The largest one raised one massive arm, not threatening, just acknowledging, like it knew we'd be back, or like it was warning us not to come back. We didn't speak during the drive back to town. What was there to say? We'd found proof. We'd both seen them, multiple creatures, coordinating and intelligent. But we'd also lost all 4 trail cameras in our panicked retreat. No footage, no evidence. Just 2 terrified rangers and a story nobody would believe. 2 weeks later, Elena called me into her office. Her expression was unreadable as she gestured for me to sit. "The lab results came back on those hair samples you submitted." My heart raced. "And?" She slid a report across the desk. I scanned it quickly, my medical terminology rusty but serviceable. The key findings jumped out. Unknown primate. DNA sequences show no match with known North American wildlife. Closest genetic markers align with great apes, family Hominidae. But significant divergence suggests either contamination or unknown species. I looked up at Elena, vindicated. "This proves it. There's something out there." But her expression wasn't triumphant or concerned. It was troubled. "The lab flagged this as a probable contamination. They think human DNA got mixed with animal samples, creating false results." "That's ridiculous. I collected that sample directly from the scene using sterile bags." They also noted that the hair shaft structure is unusual, thicker than human hair but not consistent with any known bear species. They couldn't definitively categorize it. She paused. Daniel, I'm going to be honest with you. This report is problematic. If word gets out that we have unknown primate DNA from Shoshone National Forest, we'll have every cryptozoologist, conspiracy theorist, and media outlet in the country descending on this place. That's a nightmare I don't want to deal with. So what are you saying? I'm saying we file this as inconclusive and move on. No press releases, no follow-up investigation. Just let it go. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. There's something dangerous in those woods, and you want to cover it up? I want to avoid panic based on incomplete information. Look, even if these results are accurate, and that's a big if, what do you want me to do? Close the entire northern sector? That's hundreds of thousands of acres, station armed guards at every trailhead? We don't have the budget or personnel, and without a clear threat to visitors, I can't justify any of it. People are going missing out there, Elena. Maybe this explains why. Her eyes narrowed. That's a serious accusation. Do you have any evidence linking these creatures to the missing persons cases? No, but then we're done here. I appreciate your diligence, but this matter is closed. Focus on your regular duties. And Daniel? Her voice softened slightly. I know you believe in this, but sometimes we see patterns that aren't really there. Sometimes the simplest explanation is the right one. I left her office feeling defeated and angry. The system was designed to ignore things that didn't fit neatly into categories. Unknown creatures didn't exist in official reports, so any evidence of them had to be explained away or dismissed. But I knew what I'd seen, and more importantly, Lydia had seen it too. The question now was, what were we going to do about it? Lydia and I met at a diner in Cody 3 days after Elena shut down the investigation. We sat in a back booth, coffee going cold as we debated what to do next. We could go to the media, Lydia suggested, get the story out there independently. Without evidence, they'd laugh us out of the room. We need something concrete, video footage, more DNA samples, something undeniable. So we go back. I'd been thinking the same thing, but hearing her say it out loud made it real. Elena warned me off. If we get caught doing this on our own time, we could both lose our jobs. Then we don't get caught. Lydia leaned forward. Daniel, those things are out there. They're real. And if we don't document them, who will? How many more people have to go missing before someone takes this seriously? She was right. I knew she was right. But I also knew we were talking about deliberately disobeying orders and potentially putting ourselves in serious danger. If we do this, I said slowly, we do it smart. We map their territory, find where they're living, and we get irrefutable evidence. Then we take that evidence to someone higher up the chain, regional director, maybe even the Department of Interior. When do we start? Tomorrow night. And this time, we bring more than cameras. We spent the next day preparing. I requisitioned equipment under the guise of routine maintenance, GPS units, trail cameras, climbing gear, and emergency flares. Lydia purchased a high-definition video camera with night vision capabilities using her own money. We also brought weapons, not to hunt, but to defend ourselves if necessary. At 9 p.m., we met at a Forest Service access road that didn't appear on any public maps. This route would take us deeper into the northern sector than I'd ever gone, into truly remote wilderness where even experienced backcountry hikers rarely ventured. The drive took an hour, navigating by GPS through increasingly rough terrain. When we could go no further by vehicle, we cached the truck and continued on foot. The night was overcast, threatening rain. Our flashlights cut weak tunnels through the darkness as we hiked up an old game trail. Around us, the forest felt oppressive, trees crowding close, their branches forming a canopy that blocked even the faint moonlight. "How far are we going?" Lydia asked after an hour of steady climbing. "There's a valley system about 2 miles ahead, heavy tree cover, multiple caves, near a year-round water source. If I were a large primate trying to avoid humans, that's where I'd live." You've been studying this. I've been obsessing over topographical maps for 2 weeks. If they exist, they need shelter, water, and food sources. That valley has all three, and it's remote enough that most people would never stumble across it. Another hour of hiking brought us to the valley rim. We stopped to catch our breath and survey the terrain below. Even in the darkness, I could make out the basic geography, a bowl-shaped depression with steep sides, dense pine forest, and what looked like a creek running through the center. "We should set up observation here," I said. "Get the lay of the land before we go down." We found a decent vantage point and settled in. Lydia assembled her video camera on a tripod while I glassed the valley with binoculars. For a long time, nothing moved, just trees swaying in the light wind. Then, around 1 a.m., I saw it. A figure emerged from the tree line near the creek, massive, walking upright, moving with purpose toward what looked like a rocky outcrop. It paused, turning its head as if checking its surroundings, then disappeared into what I realized was a cave entrance. "There," I whispered urgently. "Northeast side, near that cluster of boulders. Did you get that?" "I got it," Lydia confirmed, her eye pressed to the camera's viewfinder. "Holy shit, Daniel. It's real. It's actually real." We watched for another 20 minutes. 2 more figures appeared, one noticeably smaller, possibly juvenile. They carried what looked like branches or possibly food. They entered the same cave, confirming what I'd suspected. This was their den. "We need to get closer," I said. "Get clear footage of them, maybe collect more samples." "That's insane. We'd be walking right into their home." "That's where the evidence is. Think about it. Bones, scat, hair, maybe even tools if they're as intelligent as they seem. That cave is the smoking gun." Lydia looked at me like I'd lost my mind. Maybe I had, but we'd come this far, and I wasn't leaving without proof. We waited until 3 a.m., hoping the creatures would be asleep. Then we carefully made our way down into the valley, moving slowly and quietly. Every snapping twig sounded like a gunshot in the silence. Every rustle made us freeze. It took us 40 minutes to reach the cave entrance. Up close, it was larger than I'd realized. A natural limestone cavern maybe 12 feet high and 20 feet wide. The smell hit me immediately. That same pungent mix of animal musk and decay I'd encountered before. I pulled out my flashlight, keeping it dim. "Ready?" Lydia nodded, camera in hand. "Let's make this quick." We entered the cave. The main chamber was enormous, extending back into the mountain farther than our lights could reach. The floor was covered in vegetation, grasses, pine boughs, even what looked like animal hides. Along the walls, I could see crude alcoves carved or worn into the stone, creating separate spaces. This wasn't just a shelter. It was a home. And scattered throughout were bones. Dozens of them. Elk, deer, maybe bear. All showing signs of being cracked open, probably to extract marrow. But there were also smaller bones, and some that looked disturbingly human-sized. "Are those?" Lydia trailed off, her voice shaking. "Don't jump to conclusions. Could be from anything." But I was thinking about those missing hikers. We moved deeper, documenting everything. Lydia filmed while I collected samples, hair, scat, even a tooth I found embedded in a piece of wood. This was more than we'd hoped for. This was irrefutable. Then we heard it, a low rumble from somewhere deeper in the cave system. We froze. The rumble came again, closer. Something was moving in the darkness beyond our lights. "We need to go," Lydia whispered urgently. "Now!" We backed toward the entrance, trying to move quietly but quickly. The rumbling grew louder, and I could hear other sounds now. Heavy footfalls, breathing, the scrape of claws or nails on stone. We were almost at the entrance when a massive shape blocked our path. It was the largest one I'd seen yet, easily 9 feet tall, with shoulders so broad it nearly filled the cave opening. In the dim light, I could make out its face clearly for the first time, deeply lined, with a protruding brow, a broad, flat nose, and eyes that reflected our flashlights with an amber glow. Those eyes held intelligence, and right now, they held anger. "Don't move," I breathed to Lydia. "Don't challenge it." The creature took a step forward, and I heard others behind us. We were surrounded. I slowly raised my hands, trying to appear non-threatening. The creature's eyes tracked the movement, studying me. For a long moment, we all stood frozen in this surreal tableau. Then, the creature did something I didn't expect. It vocalized, not a scream or roar, but a series of low, modulated sounds, almost like speech. It was trying to communicate. I had no idea how to respond. Very slowly, I lowered myself to one knee, making myself smaller, less threatening. The creature's head tilted slightly, as if considering this gesture. Behind it, I could see others, at least 4 more, including what had to be juvenile. This was a family group, and we'd invaded their home. "I'm sorry," I said quietly, knowing it probably couldn't understand the words, but hoping my tone would convey intent. "We're leaving. We won't hurt you." I gestured toward the entrance, hoping it would understand. The creature watched me for another moment, then slowly stepped aside, just enough for us to pass. We edged along the cave wall, moving as slowly and carefully as we could. The other creatures remained in the shadows, watching but not approaching. When we finally made it outside, I expected them to follow, to chase us down, but they didn't. They just stood at the entrance, a wall of massive shapes silhouetted against the dim interior, watching us go. We didn't speak until we were halfway back up the valley wall, our lungs burning from the climb. Only then did Lydia grab my arm. Did that just happen? Did we just communicate with them? I think so. Or at least, they chose not to kill us when they easily could have. "The footage," she said suddenly, checking her camera. "Please tell me I got that on video." She played it back. The quality wasn't great in the low light, but it was clear enough. Massive bipedal figures, intelligent behavior, sophisticated social structure. And most importantly, the face of that largest creature staring directly at the camera. We had our proof. By the time we made it back to the truck, dawn was breaking. We were exhausted, filthy, and running on pure adrenaline. But we had everything we needed: video footage, DNA samples, photographs, and eyewitness testimony from 2 credible sources. We drove to Lydia's apartment and reviewed everything again in the light of day. The footage was even better than I'd hoped. Clear shots of multiple creatures, the cave system, the evidence of sophisticated tool use and social organization. "This is it," Lydia said. "This is what we need to take to Elena, to the regional director, to whoever will listen." But as I looked at the footage, particularly the moment when that creature stepped aside to let us leave, I felt conflicted. "What if we don't?" I said quietly. Lydia looked at me like I'd grown a second head. "What?" "Think about what happens if we release this. Media circus, researchers, tourists, hunters. That valley becomes a zoo. Those creatures lose their home, their privacy. Maybe worse. Maybe someone decides they're a threat and organizes a hunt. They might be a threat. Those bones in the cave were mostly animal, and the ones that weren't. We don't know the context. Maybe they scavenged remains. Maybe they defended their territory from someone who attacked first. We can't assume they're monsters just because they're large and scary. So, what are you suggesting? We pretend we didn't see anything? I'm suggesting we think carefully about what's right here. These creatures have lived in these mountains for who knows how long, coexisting with humans by staying hidden. They only become aggressive when threatened. That one let us go, Lydia. It could have killed us, but it chose not to. She sat back, processing this. My grandmother said the forest walkers were sacred, that they were part of the balance of nature, and disturbing them would bring misfortune. What do you think? I think... She looked at the footage again, at that massive creature's intelligent eyes. I think maybe some mysteries should stay mysteries, at least for now. We spent the next hour debating. The rational part of my brain said we had a responsibility to report this, to let science and authorities handle it. But another part, maybe the part that had grown up in these mountains, that understood wilderness on an instinctive level, said that some things are better left alone. Finally, we reached a compromise. 1 week later, I submitted a confidential report to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, bypassing the normal Forest Service channels. The report documented everything: the encounters, the DNA evidence, the cave system, and the footage. But I included a specific recommendation. The creatures documented in this report represent either an unknown species or a previously thought extinct species of great ape. They demonstrate high intelligence, complex social behavior, and the ability to avoid human contact. They do not appear to be an active threat to human safety, and incidents only occur when individuals intrude on their territorial boundaries. I recommend 1. The valley system be designated as a wildlife sanctuary with restricted access. 2. No public announcement be made regarding these creatures to avoid disrupting their habitat. 3. Quiet, non-invasive monitoring be established to ensure they pose no danger to visitors in adjacent areas. 4. Any future decisions regarding study or exposure be made with extreme caution, prioritizing the creature's welfare and habitat preservation. The response came 2 months later. A letter thanking me for my diligence, confirming that the area would be quietly designated as ecologically sensitive with restricted access, and assuring me that appropriate monitoring would be established. No mention of what that monitoring entailed or who would do it. Reading between the lines, I understood. They were acknowledging the creatures existed but had no interest in making it public. Maybe they had their own reasons. Maybe they'd encountered similar situations before. I'd probably never know. But the important thing was that the valley would be protected. It's been 3 months since that night in the cave. I'm still a ranger at Shoshone National Forest, though I requested a transfer to a different sector. Elena approved it without comment. I think she was relieved to have me out of her area. Lydia got promoted to a permanent position. She's thriving, though neither of us talks about that night. We don't need to. We both know what we saw, what we chose to do, and why. Sometimes I lie awake at night wondering if we made the right call. Should we have gone public? Should we have pushed for more research? But then I remember those eyes, that moment of communication, the choice to let us leave unharmed. Those creatures aren't monsters. They're just trying to survive in a world that keeps encroaching on their space. The least we could do is give them a fighting chance. I still patrol the northern sector occasionally, though I give that valley a wide berth. Sometimes, on quiet nights when the wind is right, I hear those calls echoing across the ridges, those strange, haunting cries that first drew me into this mystery. I don't investigate anymore. I just listen, acknowledge, and move on. Because some things in this world are better left wild and unknown. Some mysteries don't need solving. They need protecting. The wilderness holds secrets that have endured for thousands of years. Who am I to expose them to a world that wouldn't understand, that would seek to capture, study, exploit, or destroy? I'm just a ranger doing my job, protecting the forest and everything that lives in it. Even the things we're not supposed to believe in. If you're reading this and planning to visit Shoshone National Forest, please respect the closures. If you see restricted access signs in the northern sector near Dead Horse Creek, honor them. They're there for a reason. And if you're hiking in the backcountry and you hear strange calls in the night, or find tracks that don't match anything you recognize, or smell something pungent and wild on the wind, Turn back. Leave the area immediately and report it to the nearest ranger station. Not because these creatures are necessarily dangerous, but because you are. You're an intruder in their home, and they will defend it if they feel threatened. The forest has its own rules, its own balance. We're just visitors here, tolerated as long as we respect boundaries and remember our place in the natural order. Those boundaries exist for everyone's protection, yours, mine, and theirs. Remember that the next time you venture into the deep woods, you're never really alone out there. The wilderness is watching, always watching, and sometimes it watches back with eyes that know far more than we do. Stay safe out there. Respect the wild places. And maybe, just maybe, let some mysteries remain unsolved. Because the alternative, the world where every secret is exposed, every shadow illuminated, every unknown thing captured and cataloged, that world would be far poorer for it. Trust me on that. I've seen what lives in the spaces between certainty and doubt. I've looked into the eyes of something that shouldn't exist but does, and I chose to let it remain free. I hope I made the right choice. Time will tell. But either way, I can live with my decision. And more importantly, so can they. 6 months have passed since that night in the cave, and life has settled into a new kind of normal. But normal is a relative term when you're carrying the weight of a secret that could change the world. I'm sitting in my new patrol sector, a less remote area closer to the main visitor centers. It's busy here. Families with kids, amateur photographers, day hikers who stick to marked trails. Safe, predictable, boring, if I'm honest. But boring is what I need right now. My radio crackles. "Mercer, you copy?" It's Lydia. We still work together, though we're careful never to discuss what happened. The walls have ears, as they say, and Elena has made it clear that she considers the matter closed. "Copy. What's up?" "Got a family reporting unusual tracks near Beaver Creek. Want to check it out with me?" My pulse quickens. Beaver Creek is nowhere near the restricted valley, but on my way. 20 minutes later, I meet Lydia at the trailhead. The family who reported the tracks, a middle-aged couple from Illinois, are waiting with their teenage son. They show us photos on their phone, large, vaguely humanoid prints in soft mud near the creek. I examine them carefully. They're big, yes, but the toe spread is wrong. The depth is inconsistent with the massive weight we know these creatures carry. "Black bear," I tell them. "Front paw prints can look surprisingly human-like, especially in wet soil." The father looks disappointed. "Really? We thought maybe—" "I know what you thought," I say, keeping my voice gentle. "But bears are common in this area. What you saw is completely normal wildlife activity." After they leave, Lydia and I walk the area, checking for any real signs. But I was right. These are just bear tracks, nothing more. Still, the incident reminds me how many people are out here looking, hoping, wanting to find something extraordinary. "Do you ever regret it?" Lydia asks suddenly. "Not going public?" I consider the question. Sometimes. Then I think about what would happen to them if we had. The hunting parties, the researchers with tranquilizer guns, the tourists with cameras, the complete disruption of their lives. They might have been safer with protection. Or they might have ended up in laboratories, or worse. I shake my head. We made the right choice. I have to believe that. We walk in silence for a while. Then Lydia says, "I went back there. To the valley." I stop walking. "You did what?" "3 weeks ago. I needed to know if they were still there, if they were okay." "Lydia, that's incredibly dangerous. What if I was careful? I stayed on the rim, used a telephoto lens. I didn't go down." She pulls out her phone and shows me a photo. It's distant but clear enough. A figure at the cave entrance, massive and unmistakable. They're still there, still thriving. Relief washes over me. Thank God. There's more. She swipes to another photo. This one shows two smaller figures, juveniles, but larger than when we'd seen them before. They're growing. The family is expanding. I study the image, feeling a complex mix of emotions. Pride that we helped protect them. Worry about what the future might hold. Hope that they'll continue to survive in their hidden valley. The restricted access is holding, Lydia continues. No one's been caught trying to enter the area. The official designation as ecologically sensitive due to nesting endangered species seems to be working. It's a clever cover story, vague enough to be flexible, specific enough to be taken seriously. Someone in Fish and Wildlife understood what we were trying to do and helped us protect the secret. What about the monitoring they mentioned? I think we're it, Lydia says. I think they expect us to keep an eye on things quietly, make sure there are no incidents, no exposures. It makes sense. We're already here, already invested, already proven we can be discreet. We're the perfect unofficial guardians. So, what do we do? Lydia smiles slightly. We keep doing what we're doing. We protect the forest, all of it. One thing still haunted me. Those missing persons cases. 3 hikers over 10 years vanished without a trace. Were the creatures responsible? I spent weeks going through old case files, interviewing search and rescue teams, talking to anyone who'd been involved in the investigations. What I found surprised me. The first missing person, a solo hiker named Marcus Reed who disappeared in 2013, had a history of risky behavior. His blog detailed multiple close calls with wildlife, including an incident where he deliberately approached a mother bear with cubs for photos. The search found his abandoned gear near a steep ravine with a creek at the bottom. The working theory was that he'd fallen and been swept away. No body was ever recovered, but that wasn't unusual in fast-moving water. The second, a woman named Jennifer Collins in 2016, had left a note in her car. Personal problems, a recent divorce, references to finding peace in nature. The implication was clear, though her family refused to accept it. She'd hiked into the wilderness not planning to come back. The third, David Park in the 2019, was different. Young, experienced, well-equipped. He'd been exploring off-trail areas, documenting them for a wilderness photography project. His last known location was roughly 5 miles from the valley where the creatures lived. I found his journal in the evidence locker with permission to review it. The entries were detailed, technical, focused on landscape and wildlife photography. But the last few pages mentioned something that made my blood run cold. Found unusual tracks today. Very large bipedal stride, unlike anything in my field guides, following the trail to see where it leads. This could be the find of a lifetime. That was his last entry. Had David gotten too close? Had he threatened the creatures somehow, forcing them to defend their territory? Or had his disappearance been unrelated, a climbing accident, a medical emergency, simple bad luck in unforgiving terrain? I'll never know for sure. But I can't help wondering if David Park is the reason the Fish and Wildlife Service took my report seriously. Maybe they'd already known something was out there. Maybe his disappearance had raised red flags that my evidence confirmed. Or maybe I'm connecting dots that don't actually form a picture. Either way, the valley is protected now. And if the creatures were responsible for David's death, they were defending their home from an intruder. Is that murder, or is that nature? I don't have an answer to that question. I'm not sure anyone does. This experience has changed how I see my job. I used to think being a park ranger was about managing resources, helping visitors, and preventing harm. And it is those things. But it's also about recognizing that we don't know everything, that nature still holds mysteries, and that sometimes the best protection is simply leaving things alone. The wilderness doesn't exist for our entertainment or even our study. It exists on its own terms, with its own rules, its own inhabitants, its own secrets. Our role isn't to conquer or expose or exploit. It's to be respectful guests in a world that was here long before us and will be here long after. I think about those creatures often. That family living in their cave, raising their young, following patterns of life that have probably existed for thousands of years. They're not monsters. They're not myths. They're just living beings trying to survive in an increasingly small world. And I think about the choice Lydia and I made. In an age where everything is documented, where every secret is exposed, where privacy is virtually extinct, we chose to let something remain unknown. We chose mystery over certainty, protection over fame, silence over revelation. Some people would say we were wrong, that science has a right to know, that humanity deserves answers, that hiding the truth is never justified. Maybe they're right. But I've looked into the eyes of something ancient and intelligent, something that chose mercy when it could have chosen violence. And I know in my bones that some truths are better left unspoken. The world is diminished every time we lose a mystery. Every time we drag something from shadow into spotlight, we lose a little of the wonder that makes life worth living. In protecting their secret, maybe I'm protecting something essential about the wilderness itself, the sense that there are still places where humans aren't the apex, aren't the dominant force, aren't in control. Those places are rare and getting rarer. If I can help preserve one of them, even in this small way, then maybe, just maybe, I've done something that matters. To anyone reading this who works in wilderness management, in wildlife services, in any capacity that puts you in remote places, keep your eyes open. Keep your mind open. Be prepared for the possibility that what you think you know about the natural world might be incomplete. And if you encounter something extraordinary, something that doesn't fit into neat categories, think carefully about what you do with that information. The easiest path isn't always the right one. Sometimes discretion is the highest form of service. To everyone else, respect the wild places. Respect the boundaries, both literal and figurative. If you're told an area is restricted, there's probably a good reason. If you find something unusual, don't assume you have a right to expose it. The wilderness doesn't belong to us. We belong to it. We're part of an ecosystem that existed long before we arrived and will adapt to whatever we do. But we have the power to make that adaptation easier or harder, kinder or crueler. Choose wisely. I still hear them sometimes, on quiet nights when I'm patrolling near the northern sectors. Those calls echoing across the ridges, otherworldly and haunting. They remind me that the world is bigger and stranger and more wonderful than we usually allow ourselves to believe. They remind me that some questions don't need answers. They remind me that mystery is a gift, not a problem to be solved. And they remind me that I made the right choice, for them, for the wilderness, and maybe even for myself. The forest keeps its secrets well, and I intend to keep them too.